Today is the day there's going to be the Locked On NFL mock draft, and we are here to get into our little draft primer telling you exactly what we want to see the Chargers do and what their biggest needs are in the first round, the trade back strategies potentially, and also what could get in the way.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into a very special version of the Locked On Chargers podcast, our Locked On NFL mock draft primer, because we got to make the pick for the Chargers in the first round, and you guys will have to stick around after this when it redirects you to the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 live stream, where we get to see who we ended up with, and we had a lot of options: trade back, stay. You're going to have to stay to find out, and it's also great just getting the rest of how the rest of the local Locked On hosts react to it, and also what the Locked On fantasy experts and the Locked On draft experts have to say about it. But for what the Chargers, David, it starts with what their biggest needs are, and I think we've been pretty consistent of what we want to do in this first round, and it starts with just you have the biggest needs at wide receiver. You can argue cornerback as well, but when you're talking about the 5th overall pick, assuming you stay there, you're trying to get one of those receivers.
Absolutely correct. I want somebody who's going to come in and make an impact right away in that wide receiver room. Obviously, the Chargers lost Keenan Allen. They lost Mike Williams. That can't go unanswered. They have to address it, and they have to address it very, very quickly in the draft. So I'm looking at Malik Nabers. I'm looking at Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm looking at Rome Odunze. Those are the guys that I want at 5th overall. I mean, probably Maserati Marv and Malik Nabers more so than Odunze, but I would not be mad at any of those 3 picks at 5th overall.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at where the Chargers pick specifically to, in the sense, or in the case that they stay at 5, it's pretty limited, right? Because you don't want a quarterback. So if that, quarterback ends up dropping to 5, that 4th best quarterback potentially drops to 5, that doesn't interest you at all. With the 5th overall pick, there's only a couple of ways you could go. And to me, it's basically wide receiver or offensive line if you're going to talk yourself into someone like a Joe Alt, right? We are not interested in Joe Alt. So when we go into this, no, we're not looking to bring in Joe Alt, even though he's more than likely the best tackle in this draft class. With the 5th overall pick, when you have potentially the chance to get the best non-quarterback in the draft or the second best non-quarterback in the draft, and to us, both of those guys are wide receivers. So I think when you're looking at what players do you have your eyes on, Marvin Harrison Jr., David, I think for us is a clear number one, and because of what he brings to the table, right? Fully evolved skill set. There's not anything that he doesn't do well. And when you're talking about a wide receiver room, like some receiver rooms need specific things, right? The Chargers just need to add talent as much as they possibly can, and they don't have to worry about a specific fit. It's just like, hey, get the best player available, and the best player available, if he's going to be there, is Marvin Harrison Jr. If Marvin Harrison Jr. is gone, the best player available to me is still going to be Malik Nabers. So that is why for us, those are the top 2 guys that we want at the 5th overall pick if the Chargers stay there, right? And I think I wouldn't even be upset with a Rome Odunze because I like Rome Odunze more than I like Joe Alt. I'm still getting a blue chip top wide receiver prospect, a dude that would probably be the number 1 wide receiver in many draft classes, right? You hear draft experts saying that all the time. Rome Odunze is a guy that would be the number 1 receiver in most class. So even if it is Marvin Harrison Jr., clearly number 1, Malik Nabers close behind him, but clearly number 2. That's why I throw in Rome Odunze there, just because it's like with the 5th overall pick, losing Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, I need them to come away with one of these guys. And if it was my choice, I would be going in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really just depends on what flavor receiver that you want. I think each one of these guys brings something a little bit different to the table. When it comes to Malik Nabers, it's that pure separator, a guy that can just get open kind of at any time and can really stretch the field. You got Marvin Harrison Jr. that has that just amazing NFL bloodline and just literally does everything well. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. You want him to stretch the field, he can do it. You want him to get open quickly, he can do it. He can do it in a variety of different ways with release packages, has very, very strong hands. And then Odunze is a true deep threat and a guy that can jump out of the building. He can go up and get it. He's a great contested catch type of receiver, also showcases those late hands, if you will, not to give any tells for the cornerbacks. So, I mean, just depends on what type of receiver you want to have in your offense. All of 3 of these guys are going to be playmakers, and in any other draft, I mean, they might be a number one overall pick if it weren't for the influx of quarterback talent that we know is going to be going before these receivers go in this draft.
Yeah, I think there's a strong argument to be made that these three receivers are, three of the top 6 or 7 players in this draft class. So when you have a need that so obviously matches up with who the best player available is, that's why we are gung-ho on taking a wide receiver. But at the same time, you look at this roster, we know how many holes it has, and even when you want someone that's that good, there's still the kind of little voice in the back of your head that says, hey, the best move is probably for you to trade back and get as many assets as possible. And if the Chargers do have the opportunity at 5 to hold a quarterback like a J.J. McCarthy ransom, right, and to leverage that into potentially getting a king's ransom, they have to consider it. So when you're talking about whether you consider moving up or down, I wouldn't consider moving up even for a Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm willing to stay at 5 if Malik Neighbors is the consolation prize there. I'm totally happy with it. But I think where I'm at this point, David, if I was going to consider moving back, which they might have a great opportunity to do that, I need a king's ransom back.
Yeah, 100%. I think for me, this situation kind of reminds me of the movie Little Nicky, when you have the angel on one shoulder and you got the devil on the other shoulder saying, hey, trade back. Yeah. You can get more picks. You can address more needs. And
I think it might be even the opposite. Like, I think that, the angel might be saying, hey, this is the right thing to do is trade back. And then I see, Malik Neighbors doing this, and it's just like, but I can't pass up on him, even if it's the right decision to trade back and get more assets. But I totally agree with you, the devil and the angel on the shoulder.
Exactly. It's just which one of those temptations is going to spark that feeling in your head.
Sure.
And the answer is going to be, what do the Chargers feel like they need to do? Because yes, there is a lot of holes. There is a lot of things that the Chargers need to address, and having the ability to trade back, to be able to accumulate assets, to be able to maybe not be able to take someone who's like a straight up, premium pick at that 5th overall, but maybe be able to get 2 really, really good players to address multiple different positional needs. That's something you have to consider. I think, yes, it's going to have to take a king's ransom, especially if it's somebody from the AFC West that wants to come down and pick up that 5th overall pick. But unfortunately, we're in a situation with all of the different players and all of the different needs that you have to consider it.
Yeah, and I think it's just how far you're willing to move back as well. Like, if I think I can still trade back even a couple picks and get back less, but still get one of those blue chip offensive prospects, those blue chip offensive weapons, I still might consider it. But I think the big thing is the team ahead of the Chargers that could change everything, right? So if you're thinking about who could take someone that the Chargers want, you could still end up with Malik Neighbors, assuming that 3 quarterbacks are going to go before you. But it really comes down to the Cardinals. And I think that is such a pivotal point, the Cardinals and the Chargers in this draft class. If the Cardinals take Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously he takes it off the table for you, which is fine. But then it opens you up to a much higher likelihood that you're going to trade back because one of those quarterbacks is still going to be available. So I think the pick right in front of the Chargers is going to have a huge impact on what the Chargers do.
I think it's the biggest thing that's going to have the biggest impact on what the Chargers do, because whatever the Cardinals do, I think is going to just decide what the Chargers do, because at this point in time, nobody knows. Nobody knows what the Cardinals are going to do. We don't know if they already have a deal in place. Nobody knows until draft night. So the Chargers have to be ready to be able to make and be able to move. They have to have contingency plans in place for whatever situation may arise. But the Cardinals are going to dictate what the Chargers do with their 5th overall pick.
Exactly. And I think that if the Chargers have that situation where they take Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4, the Cardinals do, and they have the 5th pick, I think the reason that deal is probably not in place is because we don't know who that 4th quarterback's going to be. With the J.J. McCarthy hype getting to where it's been, with the Jaden Daniels hype and kind of the Drake May hate, we don't know how those first 3 picks are going to play out. So it's going to give the Chargers a really hard decision. But for us, it's take a big-time wide receiver or you trade back for a king's ransom and sell yourself up in a great position in this Jim Harbaugh era. And I don't think they could go wrong with either of them. But me personally, I'm leaning towards getting one of those big receivers. But if you're watching live right now, you will be sent to the debut of the 2024 Locked On NFL Mock Draft presented by LinkedIn on our Locked On Sports Today 24/7 live streaming feed. If you're watching this after the fact, you'll be able to catch the episode in which the Chargers make their first pick, and we pick for them right here on Locked On Chargers on Thursday, April 18th. And you can get every episode of the 2024 Locked On NFL Mock Draft on Locked On NFL Draft on Thursday, April 18th, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.